Welcome to License to Spend with Tim Whisler from the Whisler Agency. Immerse yourself in expert insights on financial strategies that will empower you to confidently navigate your way to retirement freedom. Join us on this journey towards financial confidence. It's time to take control of your financial future.
Estate plans are not just for the wealthy. They're for everyone who has any assets and who has people they care about. Welcome back to License to Spend with your host, Tim Whisler, and me, Patrice Sikora. Tim, to many people, the phrase estate planning may suggest uber wealth and maybe imminent death.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a big surprise that many people avoid the topic.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Patrice. It's just not a popular topic. We were just talking before we turned on the microphones here about how often when I'm engaging with some folks, about some estate planning and possibly putting together that written financial plan for them, and I come to that part of the conversation. When was the last time your will was updated? And they all of a sudden kind of get uncomfortable. Well, that's on our list. We still have to get that done. And I think it's just, we're talking about the end of life. We're talking about possibly losing our independence. It's not the favorite topic. It's not what we don't want to think about. We don't want to talk about death. Sometimes I think people can take it one step further where they might think, well, the legal language, the paperwork involved, it's just, and also too, like you said, we don't really have enough in our estate to really consider to have an estate plan. And I just think it's just important for us to talk through this and help people understand that it's one of the best things we can do for our family, again, before, some situations occur, whether it be we lose our independence or we do ultimately pass away.
And I think that's exactly the way to look at it. It's not about your assets. It's about taking care of the people you love.
It's exactly right. It's like with life insurance. I've always classified life insurance as the ultimate love letter. We don't ever want to think about something happening to us. We don't want to think about the loss of a spouse. We don't want to think about what would happen to our kids, for a young family if mom and dad pass away too soon. But having that, love letter in place that can create instant financial benefits just to give the surviving spouse and family the opportunity to kind of maintain a certain standard of living, right? That's the best thing we can do for our family. When it comes to the transfer of assets from mom and dad to the kids, the estate plan is everything. And it's, as we go through the conversation, I'll certainly, make myself a mental note here to share what I have experienced with other people, who have gone through the process when mom and dad had an estate plan set up, compared to the people where they did not have a plan set up, when mom and dad passed away. And it's remarkable that the difference, if you will, between having a plan and not having a plan.
All right. So among other things, what does a plan do? I mean, it actually gives you control to decide a lot of things, but go through a list here for us.
Sure. If we want to kind of summarize this, think in terms about it being, it's all about clarity and not complexity. Right? It's one of the most, again, thoughtful and loving things you can do for your family, because just like you said, it gives you control. And what are we controlling? Well, number one, who handles your bills if you can't? Who makes medical decisions? What happens to your belongings? And how are assets taxed or not taxed? And I think one of the biggest things it can do is it can help avoid stress, confusion, and unnecessary legal battles.
Oh, I can think of the stress and legal battles that could occur.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about outside entities. I'm talking about family within family. Yeah.
It is. And I just remember my very first exposure to seeing adults, quote unquote adults, after, something unexpected happens, the loss of a family member. And I'll just keep the story very, very short. But I'm going back to my senior year of high school. And the girl I was dating in high school back at the time, she was a year younger than me. And she was very, very close to her grandmother. This was her grandmother on her dad's side. And, her health was fading, and ultimately she ended up passing away. And so, just being the good boyfriend, I was very close with the family. And we went to the funeral. You go to the cemetery, you have the meal, the lunch meal at the church. We come back to the house. And, of course, it's uncomfortable. Everybody's sad and whatnot. And from the far side of the house, all of a sudden I hear these voices start to raise in volume. And long story short, it's her father and her aunt, the siblings, at top throat yelling at each other about the car. I mean, my girlfriend's grandmother had just passed. It was her car, and now they're like yelling about the car. And Patrice, I'm not talking about some type of collectible. I'm
I was
just
going to
talking
say, was there
about
something special about this car?
nope. It was just, I don't know why all of a sudden, I have no idea what happened from, but just to see that happen after I mean, just got back from the church. The services were just over. It was just so sad to see that. So my whole point is, if we can have documentation in place, as we're going to go through the conversation here, it just can eliminate, that type of potential situation and the confusion and the unnecessary stress that can occur if people don't know what to do. Now, all of a sudden, decisions are made from opinions. Well, I think this is what should happen. And I think now all of a sudden you get egos and opinions in the way, and here comes the chaos.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about the documents there.
Mm-hmm. So, when we kind of look at this and we try to figure out, the different things we can do, like, for example, let's talk through, like, for example, who gets what, right? If we boil the estate plan down, who gets what, that's kind of the core, question, if you will, of estate planning, right? We've got stuff. Now you decide who receives it. So, the thing we have to keep in mind is, if we don't decide it, somebody else will, like I was just talking about with
Mm-hmm.
opinions. And that's when things will go sideways, because the last thing you want to hear a loved one say is, they got what? I mean, right? That's never a good situation. So, it's basically when we start thinking through of, maybe some documents that we want to have, it really kind of, there's a few of them we want to look at. So, for example, if we have not, we're not of the situation where we've passed away, maybe we've lost our ability to make our own decision. Now, it's like we said before, who's going to pay your bills? Who's going to provide medical decisions? Well, that's where we want to have some what we call powers of attorney documents set up. And, there can be a healthcare power of attorney. There can be a financial power of attorney. There's a medical directive. So, like, for example, let's just say somebody's not of their mind anymore, and still have bills to pay, right? We have, we've got assets that have to be managed. The power of attorney is basically saying you are naming somebody that you know, like, and trust to act on your behalf. Okay. So that way, then, if we need to make a decision on maybe an investment, or maybe we're trying to figure out if we should sell the house. I mean, we're talking major financial decisions. That's where a financial power of attorney comes into play. And now that person can act on our behalf.
What has to happen before that person can act?
So what has to happen is that document has to be drawn up by the actual owner, if you will. So basically, let's just say, Bob and Mary have kids, right? They've got Joe and Jane, for example. I'll probably forget these names because I'm making these up as we're talking. But so Bob draws up a financial power of attorney, and he basically says, if something happens to me and I'm not able to make decisions, then my wife, Mary, can act on my behalf. So they put that into a document. And for this particular document, these are normally notarized. So they're witnessed and notarized. Therefore, it's a legal binding document. And all the witnesses say, yep, Bob was in his right mind when he announced as Mary, being his wife, to act on his behalf, witnessed, notarized, right? Let's take it from one step further. Let's say, for example, Mary has passed away. Now, Bob is by himself, and he's of sound mind. Mary's no longer around, but he maybe wants to name his son Joe as that financial power of attorney. So again, the process is you get the document out. Bob announces and identifies himself. He announces his son Joe as his financial power of attorney. It's witnessed and notarized. So that way, then Bob hasn't passed away. But if Bob all of a sudden becomes, incapacitated, is not really all there mentally, and there still need to be some decisions made, that document names Joe, and now that Joe can show that to a bank. He can show it to an investment advisor, whoever the people are who are kind of helping, who have where Bob has assets, lined up. Joe can now act on his dad's behalf because that document was created, signed, notarized, and in existence.
Okay. What about the medical?
So the medical one is very, very important, because the medical basically tells doctors your preferences for end of life care. So again, we just think in terms of a small family, right? We just named Bob and Mary, and they got Joe and Jane. They got 2 kids. Well, my mom was one of 7 kids, right? So I saw, unfortunately, firsthand what can happen when you have larger families, because when you have 2, 3, 4, 7 kids, How many different opinions do you have?
Oh
Two, three,
boy.
four, seven, right?
Boy. Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden a parent is in the hospital. They're in a hospital bed. And maybe again, they're not there mentally. Maybe they're in a coma. Maybe we don't know what's happening. And maybe a doctor's saying, look, you have to make a decision here on what do we do? Do we prolong life? Do we give mom or dad the opportunity to continue to extend life? Or did mom or dad want to have the DNR, do not resuscitate type of situation? If there's no document in place, who makes that decision? Right? I mean, so I think that's why it's so important to have that document set up ahead of time, because it relieves the family of that burden. Now, this is what mom's wishes were. This is what dad's wishes
Right.
are. Nobody has any grounds to argue about it. Opinions don't matter. This is what mom and dad wanted. And I think it provides some clarity. I think it can provide some closure. So having that type of document is so important. Again, when you think in terms of estate planning.
If you don't have that document, Tim, and you should be in a coma, let's say,
Mhm.
can your kids say, let's not prolong this? Or is it simply, there's been nothing said? I mean, nothing's written down. The hospital says, oh, no, we can't do that. I mean, we're just going to, we're going to do everything we can to keep them alive.
Yeah, and that's the part, Patrice, that's kind of actually above my pay grade. When it starts to get, that situation occurs, I don't know what all, what happens, who makes that decision?
Yeah, I don't either.
Where's that pecking order? And that, like I said, that's the part where even with all the different, resources that I have access to, you just kind of look and try to figure out, where does that come from? Who makes that decision?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it's one of the things where I don't know how that works. That's where I kind of like to tell people, let's have the conversation to create awareness. And let's make sure we find that estate planning attorney where we go through these what if scenarios. Because again, we've got the internet. The internet provides a lot of information, a lot of resources per se, but at the same time, if we don't have things squared up the way we want them to be, and all of a sudden that situation occurs, what happens after that?
And it
Right?
can occur anytime.
Anytime. Again, we just have no idea when that could happen. So I think it's just it's so important to really have these things ahead of time on a proactive basis before the situation actually occurs.
All right. So we are talking a medical directive,
Mhm.
a healthcare power of attorney. Is that the same thing?
It kind of is. So it can be basically it's from what I understand about it is, and you're talking to a guy who simply can read language, but I don't understand exactly the intricacies of it. It's just an important thing to do because they'll separate healthcare and financial.
Aha.
So like
Okay.
I think that's the key. So if we are in a hospital bed, or if we're not sure, what is this person's wishes? What do they want to have happen? Do they want to be potentially saved? Do we want to be DNR? I mean, all of that's in the healthcare power of attorney, and everything else, financial and property, is in the other document.
Which means you have a financial power of attorney and a durable power. Are they the same?
So the durable power of attorney, from my understanding, it's a little bit different of a document. I think the two most popular ones is that healthcare power of attorney and the financial power of attorney.
Okay.
And that other document basically just says it, kind of remains in effect even if you are incapacitated.
Okay.
So again, the powers of attorney are us giving instructions while we still are alive.
Mhm.
We've not passed away yet, but from my understanding, that's when the powers of attorney expire. They end whenever it's our power of attorney, whenever we pass away, that power of attorney is null and void.
Okay. That makes sense.
That's when we transition to the will, the trust, which we'll talk about here in a second.
And who draws these up?
So again, we want to seek counsel from an estate planning attorney, right? I mean, obviously with the resources that are available, and we'll talk about the will, we'll talk about the trust here in a second, but there's all kinds of resources available on the internet. I'm not trying to say that these resources aren't credible, but I just think there's something to be said about, okay, if we get some information on the internet, maybe go get it verified, right? That whole saying, trust but verify. We've talked about that before.
Yes.
Sit down with somebody that's all they do, and find one that you feel comfortable with. Some people find the conversation maybe with an attorney, number one, somewhat expensive, possibly. Number two, can I understand that language? But I just think it's important for us to consider sitting down with somebody local and saying, look, these are our wishes. I don't want to be a burden to my family. I don't want there to be arguments over my assets and my stuff. I don't want them to, if I'm out of my mind and I'm laying in a hospital bed and I can't speak for myself, I don't want to put that stress on them. So what do I need to do ahead of time? I just think it's important to go see that professional, to have those documents set up and be proactive and
I
take that burden for family.
I agree wholeheartedly. And yes, it does cost a bit of money. It's not a lot though. And just think of the peace of mind
Yeah.
that it gives you once you fill out these papers and you sign them.
Yeah.
I can tell you from personal experience, you feel like a weight's been lifted from your shoulders.
Absolutely.
It's done. It's there.
Yep. It's exactly right. Now we can take a breath,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I remember when we had our trust drawn up, and the documents he handed back to me, and it was really interesting because, I don't speak this language. So it was really it's kind of an enlightening type of an experience because he said, okay, Tim, here's your documents. You put these in your glove compartment of your car. Rhonda, here's your documents. Put these in the glove compartment of your car. Tim, here's the binder. Put this, in a safe place at home or go get a safety deposit box. So if something happens to you and Rhonda, you tell your boys, this is where you go first, and they can call our office and make sure everything is squared away and lined up as it should be.
That's it.
And it's such a wonderful thing because, again, Rhonda and I do a lot of traveling. I'm not trying to talk morbid, but accidents happen. If something happens to the two of us, I know full well that everything is going to be lined up and the assets are going to be distributed to our boys at certain ages, certain life events, just like we were still here on earth with them. And it's just peace of mind that it provides.
What happens if you die well, you die and you don't have any documents at all?
So the legal term, again, we get a lot of our language from legalese, right? attorney language. They call that dying intestate. So basically what that means is the state will write your will for you.
Oh, and that's what we all want to have done, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, because they know exactly what we want.
Mm-hmm.
They have our interests at best heart,
They
right?
know the family, sure.
You betcha they do. They understand the whole dynamic and who gets along and who doesn't, right? It's basically, a judge deciding who your heirs are and what they get, and it's often not what you would have chosen.
Mm.
And I just think about that when I was preparing for this and going through the research on this, and I've got a fantastic team of people who helped me with my marketing efforts, who provided me with a fantastic, PowerPoint presentation to go through because we do some live events in the area and we talk about this again at a high level. I remind everybody, look, I'm not an estate plan attorney, but this is what you want to have. When you have a written financial plan, Patrice, it has to involve estate planning. It has to. And whether we need a will or trust or neither, my whole point is when we share this information with people, I always tell people, think in terms of that family member, or maybe we kind of have a little bit of a friction, right? They say you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family, right? Okay, that's fine. We understand family dynamics. You pass away without any type of documentation and you die what they call intestate. Now the court's going to decide, and it will not be according to our wishes. And a lot of times it can create some friction in the family. That's why I said before, they got what? That's not a good situation. So again, let's be adults about this. Let's have that conversation, find that estate plan attorney and go through this. So that way, then you don't have to put your family through that process.
All right, something many people will talk about is probate, and they throw up their hands and say, "Avoid probate at all costs." Well, my mom went through probate when my dad died. It was
Yeah.
nothing. It was
Yeah.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But what's the story here?
So basically what happens is when we pass away, right, we've got an estate, we've got stuff that's left over. If we have a will, the will is the document where we basically say, I so and so upon my passing leave so and so this, and this, right? We're naming who's going to receive our assets, right? And again, let me back up a little, make sure I provide some clarity. I'm not talking about financial products. I'm talking about items that do not have a beneficiary named to them. Okay, so let's identify those. For example, Patrice, you and I have been talking now did you realize this the other day that this is our 5th year of working together on the podcast? I was just preparing for, can you believe that? It was August of
Really?
2020. Yeah. And I thought that's kind of a cool
Wow.
milestone. But anyway, so thank you for 5 wonderful years, Patrice.
To you too. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Same to you. So my point is, through 5 years of our conversations, we're always talking about written financial plans, right? How do we create that balanced portfolio for retirement to create the income we need? So those types of products that we talk about have a beneficiary named. If you have an IRA, a Roth, 401k, you name beneficiaries. So that way, when that IRA owner passes away or that jointly owned account, whenever those people pass away, there are beneficiaries named to be directly contacted whenever those owners pass away, right? It goes right to those people, whether there's a will, a trust, or neither.
Right.
But I'm talking about now the assets, the stuff, quote unquote, that don't have a beneficiary, right? Furniture, collectibles, a house,
Oh,
cars,
okay.
right? So if we have a will and that person has passed, now probate is part of settling that will. So basically, what happens is, now the court will they'll appoint an attorney, or if there's, like you said, your mom helped went through the probate because your dad passing away, or if mom and dad have both passed away, now the surviving kids are around, they'll go find that attorney and go through the probate process. And you're right, sometimes it can go smooth, sometimes it's a little bit clunky and bumpy. Some of the characteristics about it is that it depends upon what state we're in. It's different for your state. It's different for me here in Illinois. It's a state kind of governed thing, but a lot of times it can be at least a year. It just depends upon what the state draws up. There's attorney fees, there's court costs. It's public. I mean, back in the day where we had that invention called a newspaper. I don't know how many people read newspapers anymore, but I remember on Sundays you had a huge section of the Sunday paper with public notices.
That's right.
And that's what it was. So and so passed away. They had a will. It's basically what that's doing, Patrice. It's giving creditors the opportunity to stake a claim in that estate before it's settled.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's public. I'll keep in the story very, very short, but back in the day, I'm going back a few years, even before you and I started to work together on the podcast. My office was there in Morton, and it was 7 blocks from my house. It was a glorious commute, right? Very, very short. Needless to say, I got to know my mailman very, very well, right? I saw him twice a day, right? Sometimes on the weekend, whatnot, and we got to be friends first, and then I remember one day he comes to my office and he goes, "What do you do here, by the way?" And so I told him, and he said, "You know what? Take a look at my stuff, would you?" I said, "Sure." So long story short, he becomes a client, and walking him through his last couple of years of working for the Postal Service, he retires, enjoying retirement, and then, as unfortunately sometimes as life occurs, he developed bladder cancer and held on for a little while, then passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And my point is, I always knew about his 2 boys through our financial planning conversations, and he always kept saying, "This is what I want to have happen. This is how I want this to all go down." And I just so wish, Patrice, that I knew then what I know now, because I would have been able to take Steve through one more, layer of conversation and
Right.
say, "Hey, just think about maybe not just having the will, but think about maybe having a trust set up." And we'll talk about the trust in a second. But anyway, long story short, he passed away. I go to the visitation. I met his 2 boys there. I had business cards for each of them. I said, "Look, you guys take all the time you need. Here's my contact information. Dad's got money for you. Just call me when you want to come in and meet, and we'll go through everything." And they did. And I'm honored to say that, through all these years here, it's been a number of years, they're both still clients of mine, so I'm now kind of helping them build wealth. So it was a very, very much of an honor to be able to carry on the legacy, of my client and now work with his 2 boys. It was really kind of a cool thing. My point is, he had a will, it triggered probate. It took almost 3 years to settle his estate.
Oh my.
And he had a house and 2 cars. One of them was like a 65 Mustang, was like his dream car, right? But in that particular situation, it just took a little bit longer than maybe it really should have. So probate is what we talk about, is when a will needs to be executed and those wishes need to be carried out. It goes through what we call the probate process.
All right. Now you mentioned beneficiaries, and I think we should jump back to that and make a special point here.
Mhm.
You've got to make sure your beneficiaries on any documents are up to date because they trump the will.
Yes. That's such a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's exactly right. Whether we have a will or trust or neither, when we
Right.
have a document with a named beneficiary, that is the law. That's one of the commandments that was etched in stone as Moses brought the 10 commandments down from the mountaintop.
That
This
was
is
number
law.
11.
That's right, number 11. So again, it's a great point, because anytime that we have documents already in place, we also want to make sure we have got those accounts with beneficiaries up to date. We've talked before. One of the things that I'm so blessed to be able to share with folks is my experience being one of Ed Slott's elite IRA advisors. His title, not mine. I'm not elite at anything, but it's just kind of what we do. I attend 2 workshops a year. And it's a day and a half of sitting in a huge, hotel conference room talking about IRA things. And there's always a session where we talk about, settling estates and the lawsuits. I mean, just countless numbers of lawsuits, that can come from the results of divorces, adoptions. I mean, it's just remarkable, Patrice, how many people go through unnecessary pain and stress and arguments and lawsuits, all because a beneficiary wasn't updated.
Oh boy.
It's just remarkable. So again, it's just a good reminder out there for those who are listening in. Just review your documents, review your beneficiaries, because whether you have a will, a trust, or neither, just like Patrice said, the payout from an IRA, a 401k, that is where the dollars are going as per the details on that particular policy.
All right. And one other thing, perhaps, before we wrap this up, you mentioned a trust. Talk about trusts.
So there's a couple different trusts. I mean, well, probably more than a couple, but there's a couple of trusts that I'm familiar with, right? One of the more popular ones is what we call a revocable living trust. So just in kind of keeping it in simple terms, think of it like a bucket. You get to control what goes in and what comes out while you're alive, right? It's revocable. Revocable basically means you can make changes to it. It's when you pass, what's in the bucket is distributed exactly how you want without court involvement. Okay? So basically, when we say it's revocable, you can adjust it anytime you need. And so it can also manage your affairs, if you become incapacitated. One of the things that I was able to do in my career, I made a pretty significant change in my career back in 2017. It was about halfway through the year 2017. And it was the last office that I had open in Morton, where we live. And long story short, I became an advisor with an entity, a national entity, who I was going to be their advisor for the state of Illinois. And my job was to go out and visit with clients who already had a living revocable trust set up. My job was to go in, just have a refresher with them. Hey, this is how everything's set up. Is this how you want everything distributed upon your passing? Oh, no, we got to make some changes, right? We had another grandchild set up, or no, this person passed away, or this person got divorced, whatever. We just, made sure the trust documents were all set up, powers of attorney, the will, the trust, everything. And then my job as a retirement income planner was to say, okay, let's make sure the trust is properly funded, right? So I learned a lot. I was with that firm just a little over a year. It wasn't real long. Just for some reasons, it did not last as long as I thought it should have. But I learned a lot, because my point of sharing this is not only did I meet with people who had the trust in existence, I met with 5 different families who now all of a sudden that trust became their task. Mom and dad had passed. The trust is in front of them. One of the kids' name is the successor trustee. Now they need help settling it, right? Now all of a sudden that revocable living trust became irrevocable. Mom and dad have passed. Now it's irrevocable. Now everything's going to be passed out. And so I go in there with a checklist. And one of the first things you do is you create an EIN number, right? An employer identification number. Because, you and I and everybody else listening, we all have social security numbers, right? But when a trust is an entity, you need to assign a tax identification number to that. And that's one of the first things you do. So it's a very simple process. And basically, Patrice, to keep it short, we went through a very, very easy step-by-step checklist. And with each one of those 5 families, I gave them my card. I said, look, you've got the checklist here. If anything else comes up or you feel like you're hitting a snag, don't hesitate to call me. And of those 5 families, not one of them called me. My point is the trust, it's such a simple process to go through, because you don't have to go through the court system. All of mom and dad's wishes are right there in front of you. You have the successor trustee who's kind of the quarterback. It's not public. It's very private. It's just between the family. And everything is laid out. One of my clients that I have up actually in Minnesota, I got to know her mom and her stepdad. They live down here in central Illinois. And then after the 2 of them have passed, now all of a sudden, my client, she inherits these dollars from her mom and from her stepfather. She's in a whole different state. She's like, Tim, what do I do? I said, it's okay. Number one, I'm so sorry for your losses. Obviously, we talked through that grief and understanding she's going through a major life change because she lost, her mom and her stepfather. And now we have to go through the financial detail, the red tape. But it was just remarkable how many people I've talked to, Patrice, who where mom and dad had that trust, nearly every one of them said the same thing. I'm so glad mom and dad did this for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
because it just kept things so much simpler for us, because everything was outlined. There was no stress, no major decisions to make. They just simply followed instructions.
And that's exactly what this is all about. As you said, it's a it's about the wishes. It's the wishes that you have for the people you love. You don't want them to go through the stress. You don't
Right.
want them yelling in the kitchen about the car,
Right.
arguing about that. You
Yep.
want everything to be, well, maybe not, kumbaya, but at least, happy,
Right.
relatively.
Relatively. I
Yeah.
mean, you're right. I mean, we're not going to please everybody, but the thing I like about it is the fact that mom and dad dictate that. And that's what I like to encourage everybody listening in. It's not a hard subject to have with an estate plan attorney. You know all the answers.
Mm,
There's no trick questions. They're going to say, well, what do you want to have happen with this? What do you want to do? You know those answers. And if you're not sure, husband and wife can kind of talk through it a little bit, or maybe take the forms home and think on it, sleep on it, pray about it, whatever the decision making process is. Then you come back, everything's outlined. And I'm firmly of the believer, Patrice, that I think there needs to be transparency before it becomes reality, right? Just sit the kids down, maybe at Thanksgiving, maybe at Christmas, have the grandkids go watch a movie or something, right? Just an adult only conversation, and say, look, kids, this is what mom and dad and I, this is what we have done. Or this is what, kids, dad's gone now. This is what I have done for you. Here's where it's at, right? I mean, a person can, mom and dad can kind of dictate how deep in details they want to go. But the point of it is, just knowing there's a plan. To your point, Patrice, the comment you just made, I think it may not make everybody happy, but it's certainly not going to be grounds for a major fight or argument, because this is what mom and dad said.
that's
There's
right.
no arguing. Here it is
Not only
in
that,
black and white.
and not only that, as you said, if you bring the kids together to sit down at the table, you are in fact empowering them. You are saying, I love you.
Yep.
I trust you.
Yep.
And these are my wishes, and you will follow them.
Absolutely. Because again, as we know, money changes people.
It
I
does.
mean, we can have, and it's really a sad thing. I think that's why the Bible always talks about, for the love of money is the root of all evil. Having money is not a bad thing to have, but whenever we have it and we've been blessed with it, and now we want to bless on the next generation and give them an opportunity to maybe do the same thing for their kids and on down the line, let's do it without there being a major headache and stress and unnecessary lawsuits and, families separating and never talking to each other again. I mean, I remember, keeping this very brief, I lost my grandmother. Again, my mom was the youngest of seven, right? So, my mom was the youngest, so therefore all my aunts and uncles on her side were all older, right?
Mhm.
I had a cousin who was the same age as my mom, right? So I had a second cousin who was my age, right? So, it's just generational like that. And I remember my senior year of high school, when my mom and my grandmother had passed away, two of my uncles weren't there. And I remember there at the service, I'm thinking, okay, I remember leaning in and kind of whispering to my dad, hey, where's Uncle so and so and Uncle so and so? And my dad, I just remember thinking back on it. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but he's like, well, they just couldn't make it. I'm like, oh, okay. But then I thought, they couldn't make it to their
Make
own
it.
mother's funeral?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. I didn't question it, right? Life goes on. A few years passed away. Then all of a sudden, at a family conversation, it was brought up. And I guess, anyway, long story short, there was dissension in the family over it wasn't even fact, over the opinion that one of my mother's oldest siblings and her husband moved into the house to help take care of their parents, my grandparents, and the other siblings thought that they were stealing money from their own parents. Patrice, they had no money.
Oh,
They had Social Security dollars. That was it. My grandfather passed away, and now the second of them passed. The kids had to get together and pull some money together just to pay for the funeral. But two of their own sons, my grandmother's, two of my uncles, didn't even show up because they thought the other sibling was taking money away from them. I mean, how sad is that? You don't get that back.
no, you don't. You don't.
So I just think that's why, again, if we can just have the conversation ahead of time, you've got assets, you've got family, you've got thoughts as far as how you want things to play out, right? It's one of the last things we get control over before we slip into eternity. Get the documents set up, have the conversation, let your kids know. Because just like you said, Patrice, it empowers the kids. It provides peace of mind. It can actually create a little bit of a bond, maybe solidify that
Yes.
bond,
Yes, I think so.
and now everything's laid out. I just think it's a good thing for us to think about. And again, for people listening, if you're not sure, maybe who should I talk to? By all means, if you're here in Central Illinois and you're listening, give us a call. I'll be happy to give you the name and phone number of the estate planning attorney that Ron and I work with. Because when I started working with this guy, again, I'm talking, we're talking about a language that I don't understand. He's the expert. I'm not. but his bedside manner was incredible. He was asking me questions. He made me feel really comfortable, made Rhonda feel very comfortable. And I remember just asking him, I said, and ironically enough, his name is also Tim. I said, Tim, would you be willing to bring on some more clients in your practice? He said, absolutely. And so anytime that comes up in my conversation, people are like, well, we don't know who to go to. Give this guy a call.
All right.
Talk with him, right? Maybe if you live in a different area, because I don't have estate planning attorneys in all the different markets that we have our voice in, but, go to a Better Business Bureau, check with your CPA, check with your insurance agent, right? Different sources, centers of influence, ask them about people and go and talk to maybe a couple of them. Just kind of figure out, who's going to feel like they can explain a situation that maybe I'm intimidated by because I don't speak that language. But just take the time to do it, because if you've got stuff, you need an estate plan.
Well, Tim, how can people reach you?
So people can get a hold of us a couple different ways. We have a ton of resources available for people to look through by going to our website, which is www.thewhistleragency.com. They can send me an email directly if they would like, and that's simply tim@thewhistleragency.com. And of course, they can reach us by phone by calling area code 309-291-0491.
All right, folks. There's so much here, so much here. Call Tim, text Tim, whatever, but talk to Tim. And be sure to follow Tim's podcast, License to Spend, so you know when a new episode is ready for you. And Tim tackles all kinds of interesting and also important topics. And of course, please share with others. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to License to Spend. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The views expressed herein reflect the views of the Whisler Agency. As of the date of publication, these views may change as conditions change. The views expressed herein are not intended and should not be construed as investment advice, and they do not address any individual's specific situation. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the Whisler Agency. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Investment advisory and financial planning services are offered through Foundations Investment Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance, consulting, and education services are offered through the Whisler Agency. The Whisler Agency is a separate and unaffiliated entity from Foundations Investment Advisors, LLC. This podcast is designed to provide general information on subjects covered pursuant to IRS Circular 230. It is not intended to provide specific legal or tax advice and cannot be used to avoid penalties or to promote, market, or recommend any tax plan or arrangement for insurance products, discuss guarantees, or backed by the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company.